And good evening, folks. Welcome to the live stream. Great to see so many people online already. I've been trying to greet people in the live chat. So I can see at least one other person has joined since I was typing in there. So hi, Andy from Chester. Great to have you with us on the live stream. I'm guessing there's probably going to be one or two people joining tonight who haven't been on before. I've been very fortunate that one of the one of the people who watches the live stream, one of the viewers, Terry, has been emailing out, letting everyone know about the live stream. So really appreciate that, Terry. Thank you very much for doing that. Seeing the numbers go up both on the live streams and on the YouTube channel in general. Right, okay, so let's get started for tonight. And just to let any newcomers know the format of these shows. They are weekly. They're on a Sunday night at 7:30 each week. I have a theme for each week, but it's generally a magazine show, so that means we'll cover a lot of bases, lots of different levels, some beginner level stuff, some more advanced stuff. So hopefully there's something in here for everyone on that. And another newbie, Brendan. Great that you can join us. Thanks for signing in on the chat. So I know you're there. Yeah, the shows stay up on YouTube for a while. It should be a week to 2 weeks, but I'm a little bit behind with doing the cutting down of them. When I cut them down on YouTube, so there's only the first half of the show or so on there, the full show moves over onto my website where it's then exclusive to my Academy members. But generally there's the chance to catch them free for a couple of weeks before they disappear. I'm about 5-6 weeks behind on the editing on that at the moment, so there's several weeks worth that you can go and have a look at if you find this one useful. And yeah, extracts, I tend to put extracts from them up on YouTube as well, working my way through those. So some of the best bits from the older shows will find their way onto YouTube, edited down to make them a little bit slicker than is ever possible in a live scenario. So you've got the chance to see those. My infamous 3-minute Lightroom edit challenges are going up there. There's about 3 or 4 of them gone up as standalone videos. We don't have a 3-minute Lightroom edit challenge tonight, and that's not because I haven't got one, it's because I've got too many other things to be able to put that in as well. So have a look on the YouTube channel for various things coming off the live stream on there as standalone items. So about the show, yeah, ask questions in chat. We have got an opportunity for a live Q&A, a couple of points within the show for that. I will take questions in advance if I've got them, and I will take them live in the chat. So anything that occurs to you, do put it in the chat. If you're watching this on the replay, then put your questions in the comments field. Now, just to clear something up, comments fields are only available once the live broadcast is over. YouTube don't enable it until it's finished. Yeah, that's for the replay. Put the question in there. I always reply to comments, and any questions I get during the week get transferred into the show ready for the next time. So I always say, helping with the live stream, there's 3 things that you can do specifically, very easy things. First of all, subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already done so, and click that little bell icon so that you get notified of updates, and you'll get a message when there's a new live stream and then when there's other videos coming online. So that's an easy thing to do. Comment on the videos. One of the metrics that YouTube uses to help know whether to promote my channel or not is whether I'm interacting with my viewers. And I can't interact with you if there's no comments to interact with. So please comment on the videos, and I will respond to them, and that will help me. And finally, like the YouTube videos. Anything that you watch, if it's helped you, just hit that thumbs up icon, because again, the metrics will help YouTube know to promote me a little bit more on there. And also, to be honest, it makes me feel good to know people are liking what I'm doing on there. So if you can do all those, hit the like button now for this one. No excuses, just go hit it on there. And share the links to the show, like Terry has done. If there's people you think will benefit from this, let them know about it. It'd be good to have a few more viewers on here. So please do that. Helping with the live stream as well, I've talked about the 3-minute Lightroom edit challenge. Haven't got one this week, but if you want to submit an image for that, if you've seen it before, then do get in touch. Anyone who's never had an image done on the challenge, then you will take preference over anybody who has previously. And we've got a few from people who've previously had images done, but I want to give preference to people who've never had an image edited and critiqued as part of that challenge. And yeah, the showcase, photographer showcase. We've got our second one on the show tonight. It's Kevin Pack, who I see is in the chat now. A really interesting showcase from Kev, and a real insight into to his photography. That's coming up in 2 parts during the show. And so what have we got on the show? Well, we're going to start with our usual news roundup. I always do that because it does give people the chance just to get tuned in. We've got Kev's photography showcase, and then our theme for the evening, landscape photography. That's what I'm going to be talking about. And that's what we're going to be sharing a few images to do with that as well. So hopefully those of you who do landscape, maybe there'll be a few things which will help you along your way tonight. We've got the live Q&A as well, split into 2 parts as part of the show. So let's move on to the news. My first bit of news, I usually start with my news on here. New blog post on my website. Also, rather unusual in that this time, I've done it both as a written blog and as a video as well. The video's here on YouTube, and it's all about chimping. And if you want to know where the name came from, who came up with it, why it's called that, and answering the question, is chimping good or is it bad? Well, if you want to know my views on that, you'll have to go and watch the video at some point or read the blog post. So that went live yesterday, wrote the blog post, came here, filmed it all, got it edited, got it out there just in time. A couple of other videos on my channel this week. First in a series on the 7 deadly sins of photography. Some of you may have come across the blog posts I've done on that. I'm now converting those into videos. First one could gone up there about gluttony and photography gluttons, people who take too many photos on that. And the next one is converting RAW to DNG, a little 2-minute tip on how to do that in Lightroom. I always recommend converting your RAW files to DNG, and this tells you how to do it on there. On my travel channel, travel photography channel, I've got a video up this week all about photographing St. John's in Newfoundland, and that was teeming down with rain when I did that. I got soaked when I was there, but really interesting place. So if you're into travel photography, it'll give you a few ideas of photography when the weather turns bad. And of course, we've got the live stream scheduled for the next few weeks. The next 5 are up there, so you can see what's coming up. We're doing a little bit more on landscape photography next week with hyperfocal distance, and I'll possibly have a look at photographing waterfalls as part of that one as well. And then coming up after that, a little bit on macro photography. I'm going to do a session on my favourite Lightroom hints and tips, the things that perhaps you may not be aware of with Lightroom. We're going to look at lenses for a couple of weeks, particularly understanding lenses, and then the effects that lenses can give in terms of foreshortening and distortion. So those are coming up. I want to just mention my Facebook group. The Facebook group is something that I've been running for a while, and I'm just going to pull it up on the other screen for you to see. Oh, and Facebook's running slow. Right, we've got there. So yeah, here's the group. It's if you search on Facebook for facebook.com groups Ian's Studio, and you'll soon find that. This is where news of what's going on with the live stream gets posted first. It's where I put in requests and asking for information. It's also a fantastic place just to share your images and to ask for feedback, ask questions and things like that. And I tried something last week which worked really well. I'm going to try it again tonight. And that is, as you're watching this, if you're watching it on your computer and you've got some landscape photos and you want to share them in the group, then do so as I'm talking. And at the end of the show, I'll go and have a look at them, and we can see what people have shared in the group in terms of landscape photography. And if time permits, I'll give a little bit of feedback on them as well. So that's the photography group. Now, when you do join, you'll have to get approval. I've got Terry on duty to hit the approve button so that I don't have to keep monitoring it during the live stream. So if you're not a member, do go over and join that. It'd be great to see you over there. Right, so that's the Facebook group, and yeah, also on the Facebook group is my list of 200 potential blog topics, and I've been asking people, have a look at the list, let me know what you would particularly want me to do blog posts on, and I will put those at the top of the list. I've had one person so far, and that was Loz, who wants me to do the one on my top 5 tips for macro photography, and I'm going to tie that in with the live stream that's coming up on focus stacking, so the two will come at more or less the same sort of time on there. And as I said, there's info of what's coming up. Right, let's move on to industry news, and just before I do, let me just have a look at the chat, see what's going on here. Right, yeah. Kev was starting to worry about his showcase. No need to worry, Kev, it was brilliant on there. Wow, and we have a virtual dinner party joining us from Canada in the chat. Hello, virtual dinner party. Great to have someone international on the live stream. Right, back to industry news. There's a scam going around. It's been around for years, but apparently it's making a reappearance at the moment. And I just wanted to mention it, just in case there's anybody who hasn't come across it. I don't want you to get caught out on this one. And I've given it the name the overpayment scam. I don't know what name other people use for it. But the premise of this is that someone will approach you to do a photography job. I've had people approach me clearly working on this scam before now. They approach and say, oh, we've looked at your photos, we'd really like you to book you for a wedding, for a bar mitzvah, for a christening or whatever. And bizarrely, they don't want to meet with you, they don't need to talk with you much about it, and they're willing to pay up front. And they're very good as well. They do pay up front, and you get a check from them. Once you've agreed when the job's going to be done, you get sent this check. The trouble is, they overpay you by too much. Quite often, it might be by several £100 excess. They say, oh no, we got this wrong, really sorry. And when you report it to them, they say, look, tell you what, you bank the check, and then if you could pay the excess to Joe Bloggs, who's being the DJ at the event for me, that'll just make life a little bit easy. Yeah. So you bank the check, you wait for it to apparently clear, and what happens with this is they bank on the fact that the check initially shows up as cleared, so you then write the check, send the money to the bogus DJ who takes your money. Next thing you know, a couple of weeks later, the bank comes back and says, sorry, that check wasn't honoured by the person who sent it to you, and your client disappears, the DJ disappears, and you're several £100s short. So it's doing the rounds again. So if you do get approached like this, and I think one of the reasons it's doing the rounds is because of COVID, the scammers know that photographers are hard up and are struggling at the moment and will jump on any chance to earn money. So just don't get caught out with it. I just wanted to mention it so that people are aware of that one. As I say, it's making a reappearance. Another bit of news this week, industry news. Apparently, Sigma will be releasing their first 100 to 400mm lens for mirrorless camera systems. I think, I'm trying to remember whether it's 2 out of the 3 big names for the manufacturers on there that they're going to do it for. Sony and Panasonic, I can see looking at my own graphic on there. So I'm not a mirrorless user, I'm not Sony or Panasonic, but I think this is really good news. Sigma have a good reputation with lenses. They're not necessarily the best, as in the top manufacturer lenses, which are tuned to the bodies, but I've got a couple of Sigma lenses, I'm very happy with them. So if you are with a mirrorless system and you are looking for a third-party lens, this might be exactly what you're looking for. And the rumour is it's going to be announced fairly soon, so just keep an eye on that one. Just thought it was interesting. I know we've got a few mirrorless users who watch the show, so I thought I'd mention that and let you know about it. A bit of fun news. Well, I say fun. I don't think it was fun for the people involved. But did you know that photographs can brick an Android phone? It sounds incredible, but genuinely, this is what's happened over this last week or so. Poor chap, you can see the photo on the screen behind me. He posts this photo online, and people think, oh, that's great, I'll use it as my wallpaper on my phone. They download the photo, put it onto their Android phone, set it as wallpaper, and the phone reboots. And it powers up, and then it reboots, and it powers up, and it reboots, and it just keeps going through this cycle. And apparently the only way out of it is a complete factory reset, so anything that's not backed up is completely lost on there. So what's the problem? How on earth can a photograph brick a phone? Well, apparently the problem isn't so much with the photo, but it's to do with how Android phones handle a particular colour profile. And I talked about colour profiles in one of the live streams a month or so back, something like that. And one of the ways you can export from Lightroom is you've got 3 colour profiles you can attach as you export. sRGB, which is the one I normally recommend people use, is what 99% of usages require you to have on there. ARGB, which is Adobe RGB color profile, which you would need if you're submitting to a stock library such as Alamy, because it's a wider color gamut. Or there is ProPhoto RGB. Now this is a very wide gamut, and it's the color space, the color profile that Adobe use for editing. So if you were exporting an image to use it in, say, Photoshop or one of the other programs in the Adobe suite and wanted the full colour gamut, you'd use that, and that's what it's there for. This poor unfortunate chap managed to export his photo with that colour profile attached. And the problem is, with certain versions of the Android software, it can't handle that colour profile properly and it goes into this infinite loop. So, yeah, it's a weird story, but amazing how just the slightest thing can cause a problem like that, and how one poor photographer is getting blamed for turning, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of Android phones into unusable devices. So folks, do be careful when you're exporting from Lightroom. Use the right colour profile. I'd hate it for you to be responsible for bricking anybody else's Android phone. Of course, the safest thing is to use an iPhone. That doesn't appear to have the problem. Anyway, let's move on. Okay, Q&A, first part. Let me just talk about the Q&A. If you've got questions, stick them in the chat. Let's see if anything's come in here. Can't see anything at the moment on there. But if you have any questions you want me to deal with or want me to try and answer, stick them in the chat. I'll pick them up towards the end of the show. Oh, I should edit this slide. I forgot to edit it last week. I forgot to edit it this week. That comment about websites is from an old show. There is a delay to any questions, so if you want to put a question in, get it in early, because by the time you hear me say this, up to 2 minutes could have gone past by the time from me saying it to you hearing it. So it can cause some problems with the chat on there. So get them in quickly and I'll pick them up at the end. If you've got questions during the week, email me at contact@ians-studio.co.uk and I will add them into the next show. And that is where this question came from Stan. Now, I don't know whether you're watching, Stan. If you have access to the live chat, do say hello so that I know that you're there. If not, don't worry about it. I'm assuming you might be catching this on the replay. So Stan asked me a question about Lightroom, and he wanted to know what the difference is between Lightroom 6, which is what he's currently running. That was the last box set version where you could buy it as a box and without the subscription, and the subscription version of Lightroom Classic. He also wanted to know whether it's possible to subscribe to Lightroom Classic without Photoshop, because he can't see any reason that he's likely to use Photoshop, or without the 1 terabyte of cloud storage, because he has no interest in using the cloud version, doesn't use tablets or mobile phone devices for editing and things like that. So that side of things not of interest. And then he wanted to know what I would recommend. So let's deal with this three-part question in the 3 different bits to it. So, is there a big difference between the Lightroom 6 and what we currently have on the subscription? Well, the answer to that is yes, there is a real big difference. And let me go through some of these differences. The most critical one, the one that's going to hit people sooner or later, is camera and lens support. Lightroom 6 is no longer supported by Adobe. They are not adding in support for any new cameras and any new lenses. So things like lens correction, RAW conversion for some cameras is going to be missing. If you upgrade your camera, you may find you cannot import your RAW files into Lightroom 6. There is a workaround. You can get a standalone DNG converter. You can convert to DNG and then import, but again, it's an extra step that you have to do. Then we've got 4 tools which are really the bee's knees, some really good, useful tools which have been added to Lightroom since it went onto the subscription model. The first of those is the upright tool, and that's for correcting verticals. I'm going to show you these in Lightroom in a moment. There are profiles, camera profiles on there, which can speed up the editing process. There are the texture and the dehaze sliders, and there are significant performance improvements, particularly with the use of graphics cards. Now, it's still not perfect on performance, but it's better than Lightroom 6 used to be. So there are some benefits of that. Let me pull Lightroom up on my other screen and we'll go over there and I'll show you what these extra tools can do. Let me just, whoops, let me get this set up. Oh, yeah, I'll come back to that. Right, okay, so I'm in Lightroom and I've just picked a photograph from my training catalogue just to explain these on. This has come in as out of camera, and this is Bergen in Norway. And let me just talk about the upright options on there. One of the things you'll see with this is those converging verticals. So one of the new tools is down under transform. And this is really good because it sorts out things like converging verticals. Now, there's lots of different ways you can do it. I'm not going to go through them all there. I'm just going to show you the auto on this. So I click auto, it will analyze that image, and the converging verticals have been sorted. Now, it may be a little bit over aggressive on that. Let me just go full screen as well so you can see this a little bit better. It's done it a little bit much, but we've got these manual controls as well. So I can just bring that back a little bit. And I tend to like just a slight convergence when I use it. So I would tend to go with something like that. Now, we've got this white area around the outside. This is the caused by the edges coming in, but we can crop that. That's the R key for cropping, and I can just bring this in to a slightly more sensible crop on the sides there, and bring the top down. So that is the convergence. Sorting out converging verticals. So if you're a travel photographer, architectural photography, Stan, things like that, that's a real quick way of sorting out photos. I used to spend hours in Photoshop sorting out my verticals because I used to do a lot of stock photography, and the photographic libraries always want those verticals sorting out. So that's number one. The next ones are up in the basic panel. These a couple of things. First of all, we've got these two extra sliders. The first one which came in was the dehaze slider, and this slider it cuts through any mist or haze in there, but it's also a really good slider for sort of just boosting the look of an image. So this image doesn't really need much, but if I use it on here, you can sort of see the effect of it. The blues get enhanced, it gets a little bit more contrasty and saturated. And so I often use just a slight bit of dehaze just to give an edge to some of my images. So that's new, and it does work well on hazy images as well. The next one is the texture slider. Now this one, I'm going to show it you on this image, but I use it for skin softening. And in one of the earlier live streams, I went through, did I do it on a live stream? I think I did do it on one of the live streams, how to do skin softening with it. I've certainly got things on my YouTube channel about the techniques involved with that. And what we can do with that, as I bring it up, I'll go plus on this, can you see how the detail starts to bite in, particularly on the cobblestones down here and on the slats? If I zoom in, you can see it a little bit better. Yeah, oops, not a particularly sharp image, that one. It was just one I picked at random to show us. But you can see the detail comes in. Now, if I was doing this on a photo of a person, let me just go over to this image, and actually this may have been the one I did the thing on before. I can use the texture slider to bring down and effectively do a skin softening effect, and then I can use a localized adjustment brush just to counteract that on particular areas. I don't want to go into the full details on it other than to say it's a really powerful tool. So Stan, if you're somebody who photographs people and you do skin softening, again, that tool can save you a load of time on doing that in there. And finally, we have got profiles, and I'm just going to go find, yeah, I'll go back to the image I was working on. Come on, catch up Lightroom, thank you. And the color profiles, if I browse those, we've got a whole load of them. We've got the Adobe ones, which are a bit meh. They're okay, but they're not brilliant. Then we've got various artistic ones, but where's the camera ones? Camera matching. Now, these are based on the color profiles on your camera, and they will vary from camera to camera. So for me as a Canon shooter, these are the ones that I have, and they're supposed to simulate what you would see on the back of the camera, so that your image starts looking like that. And they can be a really good starting point. So the landscape one boosts everything, makes things a bit more saturated on there. But where I find them really helpful, I sometimes use the artistic ones, but not very often. But the black and white ones, I'm a bit of a fan of those, and they're really good for converting. So for example, I want a black and white conversion on this. I can just go to black and white 6 on there, and I've got a very quick conversion of my image to black and white that works. I've also got 5 of them, which are based on the classic black and white filters that you would use in the old black and white film days, using a red filter, a blue filter, and things like that. So you can see the effect of those. So blue filter, obviously the blue starts to look white on there. If I go down to the red filter, that should darken the sky on there. So yeah, so that's another useful item in there. Right, so let's go back to there. Lose Lightroom. Okay, yeah. So what else is there? What other improvements have we got? We've got tethering available. You get Photoshop with it. Now I know, Stan, that's not something that you're looking for, but it's a useful tool to have for lots of other things. And as you improve with editing photos, you will hit certain restrictions with Lightroom, where the easiest way to do it is just to jump out into Photoshop, deal with the issue, and come back. And the two work so closely together that you can just, within Lightroom, you can just right-click on an image, take it into Photoshop, do some work, come back, and you're back with the adjusted image in Lightroom and can carry on from there. So that's a plus for it. And you can sync with mobile devices. Now, I know this doesn't apply to you, Stan, but for other people, again, it was worth knowing about that. One of the big things to be aware of is that Lightroom 6 is no longer supported. Now, it's not just about cameras and lenses, that's also for things that if there's a version of Windows which breaks it, Adobe are not going to fix it. So just be aware of that as an issue. There. So the next part of the question was, can I subscribe to Lightroom without Photoshop or without the 1 terabyte of cloud storage? And the answer to that is from a former computer scientist is yes. You can subscribe without Photoshop or without 1 terabyte of cloud storage. You can't subscribe without both of them. Let me explain. Basically, there are two forms of Lightroom subscription that would apply in this case. One is the web-based, which gives you 1 terabyte of storage, and that has no Photoshop, and it doesn't have the classic version either. So there is that version. And just be aware that there is a version which doesn't have the desktop version with it. It's just the web-based one or the mobile device one, where you store your images in the cloud. So that exists. There is the desktop version. It's called the photography package, and that comes with 20 gig of cloud storage, but it has Photoshop with it. So you can't get away without either of them. You can't just have Lightroom for a cut down price. So what is available? Well, we've got a couple of packages. If I again go over to here, all right, there we go. So the packages you're looking at is particularly the photography package, and this answers the third part of the question. This is the one I recommend. It's $9.99 a month. You do get Photoshop with it, but you don't get the 1 terabyte, you just get 20 gigabytes of cloud storage, which means if you're not using it, it doesn't really matter. But be aware that there is a version of that where you pay more for 1 terabyte. So if I click the plan on there, you can see that if I was to say 1 terabyte, it goes up to $19.97 a month on there, whereas if it's only 20 gig, it's the $9.98 on that. And you get Photoshop, you get the Lightroom for mobile devices, and you get the classic as well. So I know you're only interested in 1/3 of that, but that's really the best option of what's available for it. So those are really your options, Stan, on there. So I know that's not necessarily the answer that you're looking for with it, but that's what you've got available to you. So my recommendation is that photographer package. Or you could look at the alternatives. There are other things out there, other tools which do similar things. There's a program called Darktable. Now, later in the year, I'm probably going to do a live stream looking at that. I need to spend some time looking at it myself before I'm confident enough to do a live stream and to talk about it. But it looks like a reasonable alternative to Lightroom, and it's free. So you might want to have a look at that. I have also done a series of 4 blog posts explaining the different versions and flavors of Lightroom, what can be used, what's free, what isn't with that. And the links to those are down in the description below this video. 4 posts there. Go and have a look at those. Those might help you as well along your way with that. So those are your options, really. Right, okay, enough from me for the time being. Let's move on to our photographer showcase. And this is with Kevin Pack. And the way the photographer showcase works is I send the volunteer 10 questions plus asking them to introduce themselves, and they record their answers. I edit in me asking the questions, and we have an interview talking about that particular person's work. So here's the one I did with Kev.
Hi, I'm Kev from Kevin Pack Photography. I'm 1/3 of the Creatives Photography team, and we operate from a small studio 10 minutes walk from Piccadilly train station in Manchester.
What sort of photography do you do?
I actually started out taking architectural photographs, and then after doing that for a few years, I also spent a couple of years taking mostly still life images. But I'm probably nowadays almost 100% just portraiture. Now, throughout my career, I've been taking photographs of cosplayers. These are people which dress up as characters from their favourite film, TV show, book, anime, comic book. But I'm probably best known for that because I've been doing it for so long. But I predominantly shoot family portraiture along with fashion, boudoir, and editorial images.
Can you tell us what you shoot with?
Until a few years ago, I was almost exclusively a Canon shooter, but I decided that the cameras with the battery grip and the long lenses were getting a bit too heavy for me to take out with me just on spec in case I was going to do a shoot. So I was only ever taking them when I had a specific shot lined up and I was taking a camera to take those shots. So what I decided to do was to buy a small Fujifilm APS-C camera, mirrorless camera, and take that out with me on a daily basis. And I was pleased with the images from that, so I started using it for my location shoots. And I was even more impressed with the images I was getting then. That was from an XE1. So I decided to upgrade that to an XT1, and I started using it in the studio rather than the Canon. And I was thinking, this is getting a bit ridiculous. Why am I running two systems? I'm more than happy with the images I'm getting from the Fujifilm. So why have I still got my Canon gear? So a couple of years ago, I made the decision to sell off all the rest of my Canon gear. And now I'm exclusively shooting with Fujifilm. Currently, I mostly use in the studio and on location the Fujifilm X Pro 2. And my backup camera, which I'm currently using to video this, is a Fujifilm XE3. I just love the lenses which Fujifilm have, and the fact that they're significantly cheaper than what I was having to pay for Canon lenses is just a great added bonus to me. And I'd recommend the Fujifilm system to anyone.
Which are you? A professional, an enthusiast, or a happy snapper? And how long have you been doing photography?
I first started taking photographs and sold my first set back in the 70s when I was still at school. And I'd go around to a friend's house and use a darkroom they set up in their bathroom to develop the images. My first sale was a series of building renovation images. And I'm still taking photos and selling them now. But I wouldn't call myself a professional photographer. The majority of my income still comes from other sources, and that allows me the freedom to choose what projects I want to work on. So I don't have to shoot things I have no interest in. And I think that works better for me, because if I was having to do photography to pay the bills, I think I would lose some of my creativity and have to take images of things that I really don't have any interest in at all.
Can you show us the most recent image that you've been working on?
Obviously, we've not been able to get into the studio for quite some time. And unfortunately, I did have the coronavirus myself and had some quite serious side effects. So I've not been able to get out and do any location shoots either. So it's only recently I've been able to sit back at my desk and even look at what I've got on the computer. One of the last events I ran for Creators Photography was organising a shoot for a film noir theme. And one of the next events I will be running, once we're back in the studio and able to run events again, will be on a cyberpunk theme. So what I've been doing is taking some of the test shots I had for film noir and looking to see what sort of processing I have in mind for when we actually do the test shots for the cyberpunk theme. So these aren't new shots, but I am just looking at a different way of processing them rather than for the film noir for the cyberpunk theme instead. So that's what I'm working on at the moment, but I can't wait to get back into the studio again and start taking some new images.
If you had to give just one piece of advice to a new photographer, what would it be?
My one piece of advice would just be to keep taking images, keep taking photos. The more photos you take, the more you'll start to understand the process and what's working and what's not working and why things are working, and you'll start developing your own style. I think it was, I'm going to butcher the name, Henri Cartier-Bresson, who once said that your first 10,000 photographs are your worst. And in many ways, I agree with that. You know, what I'm taking now is significantly different to what I was taking back in the 70s. So yeah, just keep snapping away. And, you know, that's the best way to learn, is by keep doing. It's great to go on to workshops. It's great to go on tutorials and see things on YouTube. But unless you're actually putting it into practice and doing it again and again and again, your skills don't develop. And I think that's really important.
What's your favourite piece of photographic equipment?
I'm a big fan of using off-camera flash. And over the last 3 years, I've been really impressed by the Godox AD200, which is available in the UK from Essential Photography as the Pixapro Pica 200. 3 years ago, when I first picked them up, when they were just released in the UK, I did put a little video together of what you get when you buy one, and that was on my own YouTube channel. But recently I put together a little short live stream where I've gone through how I use the Godox AD200 in my own workflow on the shoot. And now I've gone from just owning one of them to owning 4 of them, and all of the accessories that I use, how I use them and why I use them. I can't express enough how flexible they are and what a big change they can make to the way you take photographs.
Okay, that's part 1 of the showcase. We'll have part 2 coming up in a little while. So let's turn to our subject for the evening, landscape photography, and look at that. So landscapes. The first thing I want to say about landscapes, other than what's on the screen at the moment, is I wouldn't classify myself as a landscape photographer. I would call myself a travel photographer who does landscapes while traveling. I very rarely go out and do landscape stuff in the UK. Most of my landscape stuff has been done when I've been traveling, and you'll see the examples on here. I think there's about 1 image from the UK. The rest are from Iceland and Greenland. So I tend to do my landscape work when I'm abroad. But the thing about landscape photography is we need to remember that not every beautiful scene will make a beautiful photograph. Not every scene is great for landscape photography. And sometimes we just have to accept that we can't capture the experience that we've got, the experience that we have in that particular location. Let me try and illustrate this from my first arrival ever in Greenland. I should have been going to Greenland next month. I was booked on a cruise back to Greenland and Iceland, and I found out on Friday it's been cancelled because of COVID. Oh well. Anyway, my very first time in Greenland, we arrived at a place called Tasiilaq, and a wonderful place, except when we arrived, the conditions weren't very promising because we couldn't actually see Tasiilaq from where the ship was at anchor. The mist had come down, everything was grey, that horrible grey where you just couldn't see anything. Nevertheless, went ashore, and well, things weren't terribly promising, even on the going up the beautiful Valley of Flowers. That's the scene that you can see there. I mean, it's okay, but it's just not very promising. Still, I tried my best. Got some okay results on that, but nothing that would be spectacular. So I started heading back to the ship. Now, one of the things about Tasiilaq in Greenland is, this may seem strange, but one of the things it's noted for is an ice cream shop. And it's the thing to do there is you go and have an ice cream. And I've been wandering around, and I thought, right, okay, I'll go and have my ice cream. And I paid for it, and I sat down on a wooden bench, eating the ice cream. and I had my back to the mist behind me. I was looking in towards the shop. I finished the ice cream and I actually stood up, packed my camera gear away, ready to walk down the hill to get the tender back to the ship. And then I turned round. And in that short period of time that I'd been sitting there with the ice cream, the mist had completely lifted. And the scene in front of me was absolutely amazing. It's one of those scenes which will stay with me forever. So I immediately got the camera out of the bag, and this is one of the shots, the first shots I took of it. And it's not particularly brilliant. To me, the experience was fantastic because of everything that had happened in the build-up to seeing the mist come up, seeing the ship, the fjord and everything like that. But it didn't translate into a great image. It was a fantastic experience, it was a fantastic view, but not a fantastic image. So we needn't beat ourselves up as photographers if we don't always come back with the most amazing image. It's better to have the amazing experience of seeing it rather than capturing it. So some hints and tips on landscape photography. And I talk about the 3 grounds for landscape photography. And those are the things I'm looking for when I'm doing landscape. I'm looking for the foreground. What's close to me? How can I put a foreground interest into an image? The midground, that a little bit further away from me, a point of interest there. And then finally, the background. Maybe it's the rolling hills behind. And the reason I look for that is because this mirrors our experience when out walking and out seeing a landscape. Because as we walk along, we should be, if we're walking, we're looking down at where we place our feet. There's, I was told many years ago when I first went to Egypt and went to the Middle East, that the golden rule is you look down when you're walking. If you want to look at the view, stop walking because the ground's uneven. And this is true for a lot of photographers as well. We should be looking down. Where are we putting our feet? So that's our foreground. And then we look up slightly and we see what's directly in front of us. And that's our midground, the trees, the streams, the gates and things like that. That's our midground. And then we look further behind it. We see the rolling hills behind that. And that's our background. So those are the 3 grounds that we're looking for when composing a good landscape image. So let's look at this as an example. This is the Holmennes Peninsula in Iceland, and you can see those 3 grounds in there. We've got the ground of the foreground of the boulders here. We've got the mid-ground of the edge of the peninsula, and we've got the background of the sky and the opening to the fjord on there. So that's what we're looking for to create a good landscape photo. Again here, this one's in Sisimiut in Greenland. We've got our 3 grounds. We've got the tussocks, the bit of grass here as our foreground. We've got the beach as our midground, and the sea and the other the scattered islands and the edge of the peninsula there as our background to it. So if you look for those 3 sections when composing an image, that will help you create a good landscape image. One of the most useful tools for landscape photography, and just to say, these are just highlight points for landscape. I'm trying to condense what is normally a 3/4 of an hour talk into about 10 minutes here. Neutral density filters. These are one of the most useful bits of kit for a landscape photographer. If you don't know what one is, it's sometimes known as an ND grad, and the top half of the filter is is grey and the bottom half is clear, and there is a transition between the two. And the idea is that you put that transition on the horizon and it darkens down the sky so it doesn't blow out, so you don't get blown out skies. It brings the brightness of the sky down to the brightness of the foreground. What does it look like? Move on. It looks like that. It's a piece of plastic that you put in, and the aim is to just put that transition area over the horizon. And then you get something like this. This was in Morecambe. This is the UK image, by the way. And I put that transition on the horizon, which enabled me to capture the detail in the clouds, which otherwise would have been blown out. What about panoramas? Now, I just want to briefly talk about panoramas. Sometimes trying to compress a whole scene into a single photo seems like doing it an injustice, and the answer to that is a panorama, and you can get the full sweep of what's in front of you. Now, if you're using a DSLR for it, the advice, if you're going to be stitching the photos together, is to overlap by at least 1/3. So if you take a shot here, then you move along, so it's a third of the way, third of the way, third overlap, like that. And that helps you stitch the image, helps the software stitch the image better. Now, one tip for you for doing a panorama, and this is counterintuitive, if you've not done them before, think about turning your camera so that it's in vertical format when you're doing a panorama. That means you've got your longest resolution. That it just means that the final stitched image has higher resolution. It means you have to take more shots as you move around, but you get a bigger, higher resolution panorama at the end of it. Now, if you've got a compact camera or an iPhone, quite often it's a case of press, hold, and pan with it. Now, I want to give you a tip with anything to do with panning or doing panoramas like that. And I'm trying to think of the best way to illustrate this, because I normally need to stand up to do it, and you need to be able to see my feet. And with the best will in the world, you are not going to be able to see my feet with the setup I've got here at the studio. So what you need to do is you need to work out where you're going to finish on the panorama. So, for example, I'll try and do it with the chair rather than the feet. So if I want to finish my pan over here, I point myself over towards there, but then I twist my body round and start there. So as I'm panning, I'm moving back in line with myself, and you'll get a smoother transition like that. If you try doing it the other way, you'll see it is a bit more jerky. And that's a good tip if you're doing the other type of photography panning, where you're panning to track a subject, to do it that way. But when doing any form of panorama where you're stitching together, or you're moving a camera while you press down to capture a panorama, that will give you a far better result by using that little tip. Just want to talk about people and landscapes. We tend to think of landscapes as being something without people in them. But people can be really useful in landscape photography. And I want to give, I think it's 3 different examples of how that might work. Maybe it's 4, can't remember. We'll see what comes up on the screen. The first one is the idea of using people to give scale to your images. With this image of Gullfoss waterfall in Iceland, you'd have no idea of whether it's a small waterfall or a big waterfall if it wasn't for the people in the shot. So that gives that sense of scale to what you're photographing, when scale is important. Another use of people is like this shot in Kangerlussuaq in Greenland, and they can become a frame for the image. By putting a photographer on the edge of it, that frames and draws the viewer into the image. So it's a great framing construct for landscape photography. And they can be your foreground interest. If you haven't got anything else as foreground interest, now this isn't the best shot in the world, but use a person as the foreground interest. So that acts as the thing that drives you into the image. One way of using that even more is to use them as effectively your proxy. And here we are at Russell Glacier, again in Greenland. I think it was near, that was Kangerlussuaq as well, that sort of area. And the person in there becomes the proxy for the viewer. So we are seeing what they are seeing, and it helps personalize the image that we're creating. So again, another suggestion for you with landscape photography and using people in that. Now, there is one thing that I want to just mention here about landscape photography. We often talk about images which are taken vertically as being landscape, because most landscapes are taken in horizontally. Landscapes are normally taken horizontally, and we talk about them being landscape format. And similarly, portraits of people which are taken vertically, we often refer to as being portrait format. But there is no reason why a great landscape has to be landscape format. It can be portrait format. Or better still, let's just drop landscape and portrait as our labels for these, and let's just refer to them as horizontal and vertical. Think about using vertical format for landscapes. So here, back to the Holmanes Peninsula, and you can see how a vertical format has worked for that. It brings us in. We've got little bits of uneven ground on the foreground as we go in to see the background of the mountains. And another example, back to Tasiilaq, and back to that scene when the mist came up. Vertical format here. Now this is a better shot than the one I showed earlier. And notice we've gone full circle. We've gone back to that first shot, but we've got our three grounds in there. We've got the rock in the foreground, we've got the buildings in the midground, we've got the mountain and the mist in the background there. And not only that, we've changed the format of it so that it's vertical to make it stand out from a standard landscape shot. So that's all I want to say about landscape photography for tonight. We'll come back to this subject next week, where I'm going to talk specifically about a photographic technique which allows you to get the maximum depth of field within your landscape photos, and that is the technique of hyperfocal distance. I'll probably touch on photographing waterfalls as well, because that's something else I often include when I'm talking about landscape photography. So let's go back to Kev and the photographer showcase. So Kev Pack Part 2. If you could photograph any one person, living or dead, who would it be?
It's an interesting question, and it's one I had to think about quite a lot. There are several photographers whose work I really admire, and I would love to meet them and capture them with my own camera. But there's also lots of famous actors and people from history that I would also love to meet and photograph. In the end, I settled on Leonard Nimoy, who's most famous, and you've probably heard from him from being an actor on Star Trek. What a lot of people don't know, though, is that he was also a very keen photographer and took some rather thought-provoking images. If you ever get a chance, take a look at his book, The Full Body Project. Now, having said that, last time I saw it for new on Amazon, it was for sale for £1,200. So maybe you want to see if you can find a copy in a library or some other way to view the contents of the book, because I don't think any of us can actually just afford to go out and buy a copy. I understand he first picked up a camera at exactly the same time I did, and I would be interested to hear his story of how he faced problems being taken seriously as a photographer because people viewed him as an actor, because he was so well known from his role on Star Trek, of which I'm a massive fanboy. I just think he'd be a fascinating person to meet, and he had an interesting look, which is why he got the role in Star Trek in the first place. But the fact that he's also such a keen and good photographer as well, I think would just make it a very interesting subject.
Please tell us about some of your favourite images.
This first image is a photograph of Hannah in her cosplay as a character from How to Train Your Dragon. I'd originally arranged to meet Hannah and take her photographs in a wood as darkness was settling over the wood. But when it came to the evening and we met up, unfortunately she wasn't feeling very well, and so we had to postpone the shoot. And in fact, when we ended up shooting was the following morning, and it was about 10 o'clock, it was a bright sunlight, and she was saying, yes, right, I'm ready to shoot now. But my whole idea was based around going through the woods at night. So we found a tree just outside the hotel entrance, and I set up my lights to cancel out the ambient light and shoot it along the theme that I'd actually envisaged. And I do like the way that it actually turned out in the end. So it all worked out. But sometimes the best laid plans don't work out the way you intend them, and you have to then rethink how you're going to do it to get the shots you're looking for. The second image is a fashion shoot, which took place in a very dark basement of a nightclub. I'd been given a theme to shoot to, and when I got to the nightclub, I quite liked the look of both the sofa and the neon sign and wanted to use them as my set. It might not look like it, but technically this was one of the most complicated shots I've ever taken. There was almost no ambient light in the room, with the exception of the light coming from the neon sign behind the models. But to get this shot as correct as possible in camera required the use of all four of my Pixel Pro Pico 200 lights that I've mentioned before, along with reflectors and flags. So it was a very complicated shot to get. My third shot was taken back in 2014. I'd decided I wanted to do a horror-based shoot for Halloween, and decided to settle on something similar to Silent Hill, if anybody's familiar with the games or the film. So I bought a couple of nurses' uniforms from the NHS supplier, and those were stained with coffee and tea. I then convinced a couple of models and a makeup artist to collaborate with me on a project and organise the shoot. When we arrived on site at the location, one of the few parts of the building was with electricity was the entranceway to the toilets. And I'd seen people going in and out to use them and thought it would work great for a scary image. The way I've taken this, you can't see the model clearly at all. All the outfits I'd bought, nor the great work from the makeup artist. But I think for a horror scene, it softened the anticipation rather than the gore, which makes something scary. And I think the shot itself really worked. I made it more grainy. I turned down the lighting to so that we did have more of a silhouette and just a few details showing through. It's interesting to note that when the model shared this image on her Facebook page, she actually lost likes because I think most people wanted to see glamorous photographs and weren't expecting to see an image like this. The final shot I've included of Kaylee is basically because it was taken at Ian's studio on one of his group events, actually 7 years ago. I just wanted to point out that if you are worried about going to group events as you don't want to end up with exactly the same shots as everyone else in the room, then an easy solution is to shoot with post-processing actually in mind when you take the shot. And that's what I did with this image. Just to point out, This isn't spot color, by the way. It is just a different processing technique. But there's some of my favorite images. But what I tend to find is that the last image I take is my favorite until I take another image, and then that one's my favorite. But looking back through my past catalogue, I'll settle on these ones.
How can people find out more about you and about your work?
You can see some of my cosplay images over at my website, which is cosplay.co.uk, and some of my regular photographs on my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/kevin.pack.photography. But these days, I'm more likely to be found on the Creatives Photography Facebook page, which is facebook.com/creativesphoto, or on the Creatives Photography website, which is just creatives.photography. And if you've got any questions, you're welcome to come over there and ask me them, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can.
And finally, what do you think of Ian's studio?
I've actually known Ian from before Ian's studio, but I think it's the perfect size for shooting individuals and small groups. In fact, I rented it out myself before I had my own studio to shoot in. Ian is also an excellent trainer. For example, before attending Ian's Lightroom course, I favoured using just Bridge and doing my processing in Photoshop. But now I do almost all of my workflow bar some small alterations actually in Lightroom itself. And that's all thanks to learning how to properly use it from Ian. So if you can get along to one of his events, do. I really highly recommend them.
Well, thank you, Kev, for that. And yeah, it's I found it really interesting. There's images there I hadn't seen before, and just getting the understanding behind it, and the amount of work that has gone into creating so many of those images as well. Now, if you want the links to have a look at more of Kev's stuff, they are down in the description below this video, along with all the other links. It's quite large this week, the lot of links. And I just want to second what's being said on the chat. That photo of the nurse is really good. It is really eye-catching. Definitely well done with that one, Kev. And great to see Kaylee as well. I remember that shoot very well. I didn't realise it was so long ago, but yeah, it was a good shoot. Right, okay, let's move on. And I sometimes do an image of the week, and I've been asking people, suggesting to people that people put some images, some of their landscapes in the Facebook group, and I've just been and had a look. I've not seen anything been posted tonight, but the ones which were posted last week by Gary, some really nice images. And I just want to share those with you, the work that Gary has been doing, because a couple of these really illustrate the point that I've been making about the three grounds with landscape photography. So we've got here in this, I don't know if it's a sunset or sunrise photo, Gary, but we've got our foreground, midground and backgrounds in there, taking us into the image, and lovely colours captured with that, and that sort of opening of the sky as well on there. And similarly with this one, for some reason I have a feeling that that's around Castleton area, but I might be completely wrong on that. It just feels like Castleton. Let me know in the chat whether I'm right on there. But again, that's got to be early morning with the mist on there. But we've got the three grounds. We've got the foreground tussocks of grass here, nicely illuminated. We've got the midground of the trees and the mist on the fields, and then the background of the hills and the sun just peeking above there. So really nice. But I wanted to share the next two of his images as well, because they show a couple of other techniques. Here, Gary's using repetition with it, where you've just got this almost abstract effect of the mist in amongst the trees in there. and it's just those trees repeated over and over. So completely different technique for landscape, and it's not a 3 grounds technique, but it is so effective. Really like this. And the other one, which is again quite abstract in its sense, that it breaks a lot of the rules because the subject's bang in the middle on it, but it works. Actually, it's a repetition shot, but it's a very special repetition shot because it's a mirroring. The left and right sides mirror each other, which is one of the things which makes the image work. And yeah, Gary is just confirming it was sunrise on that particular image. So yeah, just 4 absolutely fantastic landscape shots there from Gary that I just wanted to share with you. I can't tell you much more about them because I just don't know it, but I just want to say thank you to Gary for sharing them in the group, because I've been looking at them during the week thinking, wow, getting a little bit worried about having him on the live stream, because he obviously knows more about landscape photography than I ever will on there. Yeah, the second black and white is North Wales. All right, okay. It wasn't Castleton then. Okay, so I think this is beginning to take us towards the end of the show. So I haven't seen any additional questions except one, which I actually answered in the chat. And this was a question, if I scroll back through the chat. Oh, it was from Gary as well, who was asking, when I showed in Lightroom about correcting the verticals, and I got those white areas which I cropped out, he wanted to know whether we could export that into Photoshop and use content-aware fill to fill those in to save losing areas of the image. I'll be honest with you, it's not something I've tried. I wanted to try it out, but I didn't want to risk running up Photoshop. I got, at the time I was doing it was while the first part of Kev's interview was on there, and I'm running OBS, I'm running Lightroom, I'm streaming a video, I'm running a screen on an iPad and the software with that. I've got PowerPoint running. I had a feeling that if I started to run up Photoshop, the whole system was just going to keel over on there. So I just exported the image just as a JPEG, and that exported with the white bars. I therefore believe if I'd said open it in Photoshop, it would have opened with the white bars as well. So you should be able to do that technique on there. So yes, I believe it is possible. And the trees were a vertical stitch, Gary is saying, that it was a panorama. I hope you had your feet planted in the right direction when you did the panorama then. So no other questions in the chat. If you do have any questions for me, feel free to email me during the week or stick them in there in the comments. I'll try and get back to them. I have got a question which I'm holding over for next week because I need to do a little bit of research on it. On there. Oh, I should have edited that. I didn't see any more images in the Facebook group for landscapes. I'll have a last check. No, can't see any new stuff going in there. So what I'm going to say, as we're still on the subject of landscapes next week, please put your landscape images in the Facebook group during the week. It'd be great to have a look at them next Sunday night. Because we're still on a landscape type theme, so be good to have a look at them. So please do that. Right, and just to wrap up, I want to say thanks to everyone for watching, for joining us on the live stream. Particular thanks to Kev for doing the interview with me, and for Stan for the Lightroom question and what came out from that. Thanks to Gary as well for allowing me to share those images in the. So finally, subscribe if you haven't already done so. Please subscribe. Please comment when you can. I know you can't while this is on this one, but hit that like button. Go on, you know you want to. Then next week, we're going to be looking at hyperfocal distance. We'll have the Q&A, we'll have another 3-minute Lightroom edit challenge on there, and we will be looking at the difference between using curves versus adjustment sliders in Lightroom. That's the one I need to do a little bit of extra research on before I can talk about it. I just want to confirm 1 or 2 things before I do on that. So thank you, folks, and until next time, keep making great images, and thanks for watching. Bye. Right, I just need to record an alternative ending for the cut down version, so if anyone's still watching, please bear with me. Hello, thanks for watching the cut down version of this live stream. The full version has now been moved over into my Photographer's Academy. You can find the details of that on the screen there. It only costs £6 a month and or £60 a year, and you have access to the archives for all the live streams, plus lots and lots of other resources to help you with your photography, including inspiration sheets, lighting diagrams, images with advice on them. There's a whole load there. Go and check it out. Follow the link on the screen, follow the link down in the description. And until next time, thanks for watching and keep making great photos.